Cool. So last week, oh, hold on, it's disconnected, I think. Right. As I was saying, so yeah, obviously over the last however many weeks it was, maybe like 10, we did atonement theories, looking at different ways of understanding the cross. Aside from like a violent model or penal submodel, and I really didn't know what else to talk about because, yeah, pretty much everything I've wanted to preach on, I have preached on now at Platts, which is cool. So, and then it hit me earlier this week, I guess. Me 2-3 years ago would have said that the Holy Spirit brought it to my heart to talk about I guess the Father's heart, or that kind of sonship Father's heart sort of message, because we've never really gotten into that. So yeah, I thought we can have a look at that. Cool, here we go. So the essence of this message is about understanding God, the way that He intends for us to be. He intends for us to understand Him. There we go. When most people think about God, they see Him. A lot of people see Him as like a judge, like that's kind of their primary understanding of Him in light of Judgment Day is coming, blah de blah de blah. He's the one that we stand before the great white throne. Like you hear jokes about Judgment Day all the time, or one day we're gonna have to stand before God, and all the messages about Jesus is coming back. Are you ready? All those are all about relating to God as judge, right? And that's kind of how a lot of people see God. Then, especially in kind of more charismatic Pentecostal circles, which most likely we all grew up in, you see a lot more so their understanding of God will be based on their own personal experience. So for example, someone who's been sick and then they get supernaturally healed, or divinely healed, their primary understanding of God becomes that God is my healer. Or I was I had no money, and then God supernaturally came in and provided. God is Jehovah Jireh. That's their primary understanding of God. So it's based on whatever they've personally experienced. That then becomes their way of completely understanding God, right? And obviously throughout Scripture, there are God knows how many names, or with different meanings for God, and He does this, He's the God of that, He's the El this, El that, Yahweh, all of these names, right? Especially in the Old Testament. It's not so common in the New Testament, which we will get into, I guess. But yeah, very, very common in the Old Testament. But what then happens is, when we come to the New, obviously Jesus comes along, right? And Jesus is God incarnate. Jesus is God in human form, God who's put on flesh. And He, to me, shows us how we should understand God. I mean, it makes kind of sense to me. So, okay, we have all the prophets that have come along and said, oh, God is like this and God is like that, and this is what God is like, and God interacts with them, cool. But then we actually have God come down and be His own spokesperson. He comes down to explain Himself, right? And so for me, it makes sense to listen to that explanation above all others, right? So yes, the prophet said this about God, but what does Jesus say? What does God come down and actually say about Himself? And so with that in mind, the name for God that Jesus really, really pushes is Father, right? It's Abba. Jesus is very much about His Father's business. He wants people to know His Father. Like a lot of His messages are about understanding the Father, right? The kingdom that His Father's bringing. And while there are a few verses in the Old Testament and in kind of maybe like apocryphal books where God is almost seen as that Father, like there is some sort of mention of Father relating to God, it's not in the way that Jesus does it. Like the understanding and the relationship that Jesus brings in when it comes to relating to God as Father is revolutionary. Which is something that no one had ever seen before, right? And so Jesus' primary revelation of God is as Father. Jesus, we don't really see Jesus call God El this, El that, Yahweh, any of these Hebrew names or anything in Greek. It's just Abba, Father, 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 Father. And that's how he relates to him, or relates him to others as well. So he'll call him Father for other people, not just himself. Like this Father's shared. So for example, if you go to John 1:18, I know that if you've been to Platts for more than like 2-3 months, you've probably heard us talk about this verse, because it's just one of those verses, isn't it? So John 1:18, obviously NKJV. No one has seen God at any time. The only begotten Son, or the unique Son, who is in the bosom of the Father, he has declared him or made him known. Let me put this on Do Not Disturb actually, before it gets peak. There we go. So even John, that wrote the book of John, when he goes back, because obviously he's written this after everything's happened, he goes back and looks at Jesus' life and ministry, and he's like, okay, how do I sum this up? What did he come to do? Beyond salvation, which obviously he came to bring, this was a massive part of the ministry. So much so that this is part of John's summary of what Jesus did. He's like, well, before Jesus, now John knows the scriptures, right? In the Old Testament, bare people have seen God. Enoch walked with God and was not. Elijah was caught up in a chariot. Abraham spoke with God. Moses saw God face to face. Isaiah saw the Lord high and lifted up. All these people have these encounters where they see God. But this understanding of God that Jesus brings is so revolutionary that John, knowing all these scriptures, is like, no one has seen God before. Nope. If God is like Jesus is telling me, this Jesus that we've met, if God is like this guy reveals, no one has seen this God. No one has seen him at any time. But what about no one has seen him at any time? And then he says, but that Son, this Jesus, he's the one that's revealed him. He's the one that's made him known. So we see that a huge part of what Jesus did was reveal this Father, right? This Father that we didn't know, that no one knew, no one had seen before. Jesus comes to reveal him. So it's like, okay, what did Jesus do that was so revolutionary? Why is it that someone could go back and read the scriptures, the same scriptures which Jesus actually fulfills, and come away thinking, no one has seen God? Even these prophets that have spoken about this God, they haven't seen him before, because whatever this Jesus has brought is totally, other. So we'll start in Matthew 6, and we'll read verses 25 and 26. Matthew 6, verses 25 to 26. Cool. Therefore I say to you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or what you will drink, nor about your body, what you will put on. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothing? Look at the birds of the air, for they neither sow nor reap nor gather into barns, yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not of more value than they? Yeah, we'll stop there because the rest of it's just the same thing but different metaphors. So here we have Jesus teaching about this Father. We're answering the question of what is it that Jesus brought that was so different? And this here, he's talking about the heart of the Father, right? So let's also remember the time that Jesus lives in, what people's theology is like. Their understanding of God is let's even talk about, let's put ourselves in the shoes of like the average Jew that would have gone into the temple, that would have met with the Pharisees. So the super religious people were the Pharisees, right? They're the people that you're meant to look up to. Let me move this over here. The Pharisees are the people you're meant to look up to, these spiritual leaders, right? And they make it seem pretty much impossible to reach God. You have to jump through all these hoops. This is why Jesus like turns over the tables when he goes into the temple, because they're just adding so much and making it so complicated to have a relationship with this God. So you have to behave a certain way, and then the Pharisees have taken the law and the prophets and added their own stuff on top and all these other rules and regulations. So it's just super, super long-winded. On top of that, their understanding of what God was like in terms of his character and his nature is that he's pretty much quick to punish. Like, if you do bad, God will punish you. You're going to be rewarded with punishment for doing bad things. We see that in I remember we read it the other week with Bartimaeus, right? The blind one, the one that's born blind. They go to Jesus like, so who sinned? Someone had to sin for this to happen. Was it him or was it his parents? Because the theology that they have is that God does that, right? So their understanding of God is that he's not very nice and he's super hard to reach. So it's just really, really difficult for them, right? Now, Jesus comes along, this rabbi, that no one knows where he's come from. No one knows, he has no lineage like that, like the other ones. They can't trace him to a teacher or anything like that. And he starts teaching about God in this completely radically different way and saying all this stuff about God that it's like, hold on, what? Because these Pharisees are here telling me that I need to do this, and this. I need to sacrifice this and bring this in and pay this money to do all of this. And then I might have access to God. I need to do this and confess this and do that. And you're here telling me that God cares about me? So much so that I don't even need to worry about meeting my needs? Also remember that like in this time, a lot of these guys were poor. Because, you know, they're under the influence of Rome. Like, Rome is the power. Rome is where the rich people are. The Romans are the rich people anyway. The Jews aren't that rich. Unless you're like a tax collector. Then you're rich because you steal from everyone. So they need provision. Like, they need their needs to be met. And here we have this Jesus coming and telling them, oh, don't worry about that. God will provide for that. You don't even need to worry about it. Because that's how much God cares for you. He will prepare. He will provide. They must be thinking, what's this guy on? How is he saying all this? What kind of, beyond that, what kind of God is he talking about? Because that sounds way more like a God that I would want to have a relationship with. I definitely want to know a God like that if he's like this, right? So we see shades of this in the Old Testament. Obviously, we see that God is merciful in the Old Testament, all these other things. But the way that Jesus is speaking about God and I guess it would have been extreme to them, like the depths to which he's saying God cares. That's a bit like, whoa. So, for example, in the Old Testament, when you will see these verses about how merciful God is, it's usually right after a madness has happened to Israel that God is blamed for anyway. So it's like, God is like, I love you, Israel, but you messed up. So I sent so-and-so in to come and punish you, but I'm not going to punish you forever because I'm nice. So I'm going to bring you back to myself. That's kind of the trajectory of a lot of these passages. But Jesus is coming here and he's removing all of that stuff. And he's just like, yeah, Father just loves you and he just cares for you. And they must be thinking, what's this guy on about? Right? Let's go to Matthew 10 and verse 29. Matthew 10, 29. In fact, you know what? We're going to read this whole passage from 27. No, sorry, from 28. And it's crazy that people miss the actual meaning of this passage and focus on the beginning. They focus on verse 28. You'll see why. Off the top of my head, this is paralleled in Luke 12. So I think we'll read both just so you can see. So from verse 28 through to 31. And do not fear those who kill the body but cannot kill the soul, but rather fear him who is able to destroy both body and soul, or soul and body in hell. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a copper coin, and not one of them falls to the ground apart from your Father's will? but the very hairs of your head are all numbered. Do not fear, therefore, you are of more value than many sparrows. Christians that are conditioned with similar theology to these guys will read that, and the first thing they're focusing on is fear him. It's just that is literally surrounded by do not fear, but they will focus on the fear him. Automatically, him has to be God, so we have to fear God. Oh no, God can destroy me. Oh my God, and then they get scared. Let me go to, where is it? I know it's in Luke 12 somewhere. It has to be. I wish I was using the Bible thing, because then I could just find. Oh, here we go. Yes. So from verse 4 through to 7 in Luke 12, same thing. And I say to you, my friends, do not be afraid of those who kill the body, and after that have no more that they can do. I will show you whom you should fear. Fear him who, after he is killed, has power to cast into hell, Gehenna. Yes, I say to you, fear him. Are not 5 sparrows sold for 2 copper coins, and not one of them is forgotten before God? But the very hairs of your head are all numbered. Do not fear, therefore, you are of more value than many sparrows. So again, they focus on the fear him, and miss the point of this passage. This passage is not Jesus teaching you to be scared of God because he's going to destroy you. This passage is Jesus saying, all right, you want to be scared of someone? Don't be scared of people that can hurt you physically. There's one person that can do a lot more damage than physical. But there's a but there. He's not saying that you should fear him. But this is how he feels about you. So he follows that up straight away with a, look how much he cares for you. The one that has the power to destroy you is the one that cares about how many hairs are on your head. Is the one that cares enough to number them, to know the number. He's the one that, when it comes to sparrows, this is how he looks after them. He doesn't let one fall to the ground. How much more does he care for you? You're more valuable to him than those. That's the point of this passage. Jesus is teaching that. This God that, so it's almost like he's taking their understanding of a God, because they would have, the God that destroys both body and soul, like they're very familiar with him. That's the God that they most likely know. That sounds like the God that we've been told about. Defo scared of him. And Jesus is like, okay, I'm going to use that. That God that you, the one that you feared, you should fear, cool, I know, that God, this is actually how he feels about you. So it's not that he's going to destroy you, your body and soul. No. You're more valuable to him than nature, which seems to take care of itself. And Jesus is obviously saying God takes care of nature. And you're more valuable to him than the nature that he takes care of. So again, put yourself in their shoes. You must be like, what kind of teaching? Where is this guy getting this from? And more importantly, who is this God that he keeps speaking about? And why does he keep calling him Father? We've known God as El this, El that, Yahweh this, all these names. But Jesus consistently comes to teach about his Father, right? His daddy, his Abba. So like I said, it is totally revolutionary what Jesus is teaching, right? He's not just teaching, because again, these people, like the Pharisees and the spiritual elites of the time, were like, they were just like gatekeepers. Like, they made it so hard to access God. And then we have this guy come along and say, well, actually, this is what God's like. He cares about you. He loves you. Like, this God sounds very accessible. And it's like, oh, this is totally unlike anything we've ever heard before. Right? So let's go to Matthew 7. What time's the day one? Matthew 7, and we'll read verses 9 to 11. Cool. So this is after the ask, seek, knock. What man is there among you who, if his son asks for bread, we'll give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, will he give him a serpent? If you then, being evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father who is in heaven give good things, to those who ask him? Right. Jesus here does something that we today say you should never do. He uses an earthly example to make his point. He's like, all right, you guys are dads. You can relate to this. If your child asks you for ABC, would you give him a snake? Well, of course not. No, we're good dads. We wouldn't do that. Oh, fair enough. Yeah. Compared to my dad, you guys are evil. So if you guys are evil compared to my dad, then think about how much better my dad is. Think about how much more loving and giving he would be. For a lot of them, in their theology, God is very quick to punish, right? He is the kind of God that will do that. Maybe they would have used Job as an example. Oh, well, look what happened to Job. Job served God, but God gave him up to Satan anyway. Right? They have in their scriptures accounts of God doing this sort of thing. Someone asks him for something nice and God gives him something that's not so nice. Right? And Jesus comes along and he's like, actually, my father, he's the kind of dad that would do way nicer stuff than that. He's nothing like that. Even you guys aren't like that. And my dad is better than you as dads. I remember listening to Caleb Miller. It's over a year ago now. I remember him saying, he was like, a lot of his theology got completely destroyed when he had his kids. Because he had his kids, obviously you loved your kids more than anything in the world. And all he could hear God saying to him was, do you really think you're a better father than I am? That was what was kid. Like, so much of his theology had to change because he was like, hold on a second. How could I believe this about God when I wouldn't do this as a dad and I'm not even the best dad? Right? This understanding of God, if we can catch it, is so revolutionary. And the more I understand it, the more I get why Jesus came to bring it. Because it just positions you so well. Right? So, compared to my dad, you guys aren't great dads. And my dad will give good gifts to his children. Right? They ask him for something nice, he's going to give them something nice because that's the kind of dad he is. He's not like the dad that you've been hearing from all these guys around us that are telling us that, oh, he's like this, he's like that. That's not what my father's like. Right? Let's go back a couple chapters to Matthew 5. We're going to read verses 38 to 48. Again, if you've been here for a while, you'd be very familiar with these. These are scriptures that we actually speak. We've been through some of these scriptures so many times. These are the weighty passages, man. Apparently this was very popular in the early church. Cool. It's the whole you've heard it said, but I say it to you. So, you've heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you not to resist an evil person, but whoever slaps you on your right cheek, turn the other to him also. If anyone wants to sue you and take away your tunic, let him have your cloak also. And whoever compels you to go 1 mile, go with him too. Give to him who asks you, and from him who wants to borrow from you, do not turn away. You've heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies, bless those who curse you, do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you, that you may be sons of your Father in heaven. For he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and the unjust. For if you love those who love you, what reward have you? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet your brethren only, what do you do more than others? Do not even the tax collectors do so. Therefore you shall be perfect, just as your Father in heaven is perfect. Cool. So we have here Jesus now teaching almost about like what the nature of this Father's like. But comparing him to, I guess, us. He says some very, very bold statements in here. Number one, he says that if you do X, Y, Z, you'll be like him. So again, insert yourself into their minds. God is so above and beyond, his ways are higher than our ways. There's no way we can be anything like God. We can just try, and Jesus is like, no, yeah, you can. You do this, this, and this, you'll be like God. Look how he ends it. You will be perfect as my Father is perfect. You shall be. Even today as Christians, we with the Spirit indwelling, we struggle with this verse. He didn't mean that, man. It was like this prophetic declaration, right? So Jesus is saying a madness here, that we can actually be like this Father. That sounds unrealistic. But then we also think about what it means to be like this Father. So the way that they will be like God is not by exercising power over people or being, judgmental and punishing and none of that. Jesus' way of you being like the Father is by doing what he just mentioned, turning the other cheek, going the extra mile, not turning away people that ask for stuff from you. Stuff that is hard to do. Like, I look at the one that I guess I look at as like being like the least realistic, as it were, is the one about if someone asks from you, just give and don't turn away anybody who wants to borrow from you. Because I'm thinking about like, yeah, you see on TV like there'll be like a family, there'll be like the leech of a brother that just, he has a rich brother, so he always goes to him and asks for money for this and that, and eventually you just have to be like, you're watching the show and you're like, fam, stop giving him bread, man. Like he's done, leave him. But we read this and it's like, keep giving. I'm thinking, what? That's how you just go bankrupt, giving to this guy. Like that can't run. There has to be some sort of limit, right? This is hard to live out. And Jesus is saying that if you do this, you live this way of living is how my Father lives. So then it stands to reason that when we read this, we then realize that this is what God is like. God is not an eye for an eye kind of God. God is a turn the other cheek kind of God. That alone will destroy people's theology. People now struggle with that idea. How much more then? Where that was all they knew. And Jesus is coming and saying, actually, God is more like, God isn't the kind of God that will do that. He's not retributive. That's not how he operates. God is a turn the other cheek kind of God. God absorbs your sin towards him, and his retaliation, it's not punishment. It's not how it works. They'd be thinking, what, this can't be God. Like, this isn't anything like the God that we've known. And again, even in the Old Testament, like I said, when there would be passages that would hint at this tenderness and niceness and mercy of God, preceding or, straight after would be something about, but I'm going to still massacre them. Like, there'll be some sort of wrath coming, or that's just happened. But Jesus has removed that, and he's just like, this is what God is like. My Father lives this way. My Father goes the extra mile for you. My Father loves his enemies. I'll prove it to you. That's literally what he's like, my Father loves his enemies. They'll be thinking, what? Fam, have you read the scriptures? Have you not seen what happens to God's enemies? They get destroyed. Look at Sodom and Gomorrah. Look at Egypt. They have story after story. And Jesus is like, okay, I'll show you. Think about it. If God hated his enemies, why does it rain on everyone? If God hated his enemies, why doesn't the sun shine for just the righteous? God treats everybody fairly. Well, unfairly, but he treats everybody the same. Because he has no favorites. He makes the sun rise on everybody, and he makes it rain on everybody. Again, that would have poked a massive hole in their theology, because they're Israel, right? They're God's favorite people. We're his favorite nation. We are the pinnacle of humanity. Like, God is with us. He's not with them, he's with us. And Jesus comes along and he's like, no, it rains on you just the way it rains on everybody else. God treats you just like he treats everybody else. His favor and mercy is on you just like it's on everybody else. Again, completely rattling their theology, right? And then Jesus even goes further and is like, so if that's what he's like, that's so cool for you to be like that too. That's how you should live. And he's almost like, right after that, he's almost like he deals with people's excuses as to why they can't be like that, or why they wouldn't be like that. He's like, what? If you just love those who love you, like, how are you any different to the people that you think are sinners? Tax collectors he uses here, right? They're like supposed to be the worst of the worst. He's like, how are you any better than them if that's how you live? You're the same. Your holiness, so obviously we know that holiness means to be set apart, to be separate, right? Their understanding of holiness of God would probably be similar to what most Christians are today. But Jesus here is like, to be set apart, you're not set apart in that way. That's not how you're set apart. You know, God is still to look upon sin, blah, 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 blah. No. God's being set apart is the fact that he loves his enemies, whereas people don't do that. That's how God is. God loves his enemies. He treats them just like he treats his friends, his loved ones, as it were. Be like that. Be set apart in that way. Be different. Be like that. And I've been crazy. I've been thinking, what? What God, like, first of all, where are you getting this information from? How did you arrive at this conclusion that God is like this? It just seems so, it seems so unreal to them, right? But again, that goodness that he's preaching about this God, about his Father, 100% would have drawn people. Right? It's in Romans, right? That the goodness of God, the kindness of God leads to repentance. People would have heard about this God that Jesus is speaking about and been like, you know what? I want to know. This God sounds like someone that I want to know. I actually want to get to know this guy because he actually sounds like someone I could speak to. He sounds like someone I could love, someone I could have a relationship with, blah, blah, blah. Right? Even today, Christians struggle with this idea of God, a God that turns the other cheek. How often do we hear the sermons like, grace, yeah, there's grace, but not for long. There's limit. The gates of mercy will close. Someone told me that last year. I'll never forget that. People preach a God who is, there's limits. The grace doesn't abound. It's bound. There's like a certain limit you can't go past. And that's not what Jesus was talking about here. Because God turns the other cheek. It's not like he turns the other cheek and then once he's turned, because you have two cheeks, right? So once he slaps the other one, then he starts banging you up. No. Because this same Jesus also teaches us about forgiveness. And when they ask, I think we looked at this last week, when they asked Jesus, like, how often should we forgive? How many times? He's like, basically stop counting and just forgive every single time. Right? Even the fact that, so if God makes it rain on everybody, he makes it rain on those who are his enemies. He's not doing that so that those enemies can become his friends or his followers or whatever. God is just doing that because he's doing that, because he's good like that. Right? What Jesus is teaching here about the nature and the character of God is that God does what he does because of who he is, and this is how he is. So he's just good to everybody because he's good. It's not based on how we are, our relationship towards him, or how we relate to him. None of that. If that was what was important, then it would only rain on certain men, but it rains on everybody. The evil person's crops grow just as well as the righteous person's crops, because that's the kind of God that God is. And he's not doing it for anything in return. It's just why he's just doing it because that's who he is. Right? Some time ago, 15 minutes. Cool. Let's go to John 5. read verses 19 to 27. John 5, 19 to 27. Cool. So they have a problem with Jesus calling God his Father. That's literally what happens right before this. Is that basically like, if you're saying that, you're basically saying you're God, and that's blasphemy. You can't live for that. You need to die. So from verse 19, then Jesus answered and said to them, most assuredly I say to you, the Son can do nothing of himself, but what he sees the Father do. For whatever he does, the Son also does in like manner. For the Father loves the Son, and shows him all things that he himself does, and he will show him greater works than these, that you may marvel. For as the Father raises the dead and gives life to them, even so the Son gives life to whom he will. For the Father judges no one, but has committed all judgment to the Son, that all should honour the Son just as they honour the Father. He who does not honour the Son does not honour the Father who sent him. Most assuredly I say to you, he who hears my word and believes in him who sent me has everlasting life, and shall not come into judgment, but is passed from death into life. Most assuredly I say to you, the hour is coming, and now is, when the dead will hear the voice of the Son of God, and those who hear will live. For as the Father has life in himself, so he has granted the Son to have life in himself, and has given him authority to execute judgment also, because he is the Son of Man. Cool. So, a couple of things I want to pick up on here. Jesus, the relationship with this Father that he keeps talking about, again, unlike anything that anybody else has said before him. Like, there's no prophet that was like, I see everything that God does and I just copy it. I only do what I see God do. Like that can't be possible. God isn't like that. Like how do you have such relationship? That's what Jesus comes and models. He's like, yeah, that's how I live. I do what I see him do. He shows me everything, and I just follow him. I just do what he does. And then he hammers also on, for me, this is what I pick up anyway, is how liberal God is in terms of how he gives. So what Jesus says here, and again, the theology of the day, God is a jealous God, right? God is a God who loves being worshipped, in essence has an ego, right? So he must be worshipped. If you're not worshipping him, he gets upset and then he destroys you and your family. Something like that. That's what kind of how God is to a lot of Jews in this time. And Jesus comes along and is like, actually, well, I mean, the way that my relationship with God works, with my Father works, is, one, he shows me everything that he does. So he's sharing is caring. God, my Father does that. Not only is he sharing, not only is he showing me stuff, he's going to show me even greater stuff than the stuff that you've currently seen. Just so that you guys will be like, wow. So he's going to show me stuff so that you will marvel. So I'm going to be doing greater things than you're currently seeing me do for your sake. The power to raise the dead and give life is something that the Father has. Okay, yeah, well, we understand that. We know that. That's been given to me too. What? Why would God share that? Why would God share that power with a mere mortal? Because to them, Jesus isn't God. He's claiming to be God right now. Cool. And yeah, maybe he does miracles, but like, he's probably not God. He might just be like a lunatic. But he's saying that his Father gave him that power too. What kind of God does that anyway? Judgment. The Father has committed all judgment to the Son. So the Father is so liberal that the one thing that, like, I guess everybody expects the Father to do, he's like, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to let my Son do that. What kind of God is this guy talking about right now? This is not the God that we've been told about growing up. This is not the God that we've been made aware. Like, and Jesus is like, yeah, That's how our relationship works. He's given everything to me. He's entrusted it to me. I'm the one that will be judging now. It's not the Father. He's committed it all to me. Why? So that people will honor me the way that they honor him. Right? How often do we hear, oh, God shares his glory with no one? No, that's not true. I mean, number one, in John 17, Jesus literally says to the Father, the glory which you gave to me, I have given to those who believe in me. So, God shares his glory. But that aside, here, we have, well, God is like, okay, everybody honors me, cool. I'm the one that that's gonna judge them on judgment day. I don't want them. I don't want to be the only one that gets this honor. He gives it to the Son, so that the Son gets the same honor that's due to him. The same honor that people will treat the Son essentially like they treat the Father. To treat them equally. So this God has no ego. He very happily is giving away praise and honor to the Son. You can share this with me too. I'll even give you everything that you need so that they will treat you the way that they treat me. To the point where he's like, obviously the Son, Jesus, is now saying that if you don't honor me, you're not honoring my Father. Like, we're so connected. He's made this so intrinsic that the way that you treat me is essentially how you treat him. To believe in me is to believe in him. So that kind of ties into what I was saying before about the nature of their relationship. Again, is unlike anything we've ever heard or seen. Why are you saying that if I don't honor you, I'm honoring God? Allow it. But that's what Jesus is saying. The power to give life, the Father has it, given it to the Son, giving them the authority to actually execute the judgment. It's not like he's just handed judgment over to the Son, like you have the power to do it, but I'm not going to let you do it. No, you have the authority to make decisions on my behalf. It's crazy. So this God's not a control freak. He has enough, what's the word? Not self-confidence, but something to let other people make his decisions. He doesn't have to be in control of every little thing. Right? This is the God that Jesus, the Father that Jesus begins to speak to people about. This is the Father he's teaching people about. Even their relationship. How did Jesus get to a place where he could replicate, like, what kind of relationship did he have where he was able to observe what his Father was doing and copy it? Now, I mean, like 3 and a bit years ago, maybe like 3.5, in between 3 and 4 years ago, I always, because I was big on visions and dreams. In my head, when I read, I only do what I see the Father doing. I was really hoping that like I would be able to live in some sort of fifth dimension where like I spent all my time basically watching whatever's going on in heaven and just replicating it here. I kind of hoped that was what he meant there when it comes to I only do what I see my Father do. That Jesus somehow was this walking portal of heaven where he was just observing everything that was happening and was just able to just live it out. But I don't think that's what Jesus meant there. And I actually remember Bill Johnson teaching on it, and it was really, really interesting. It still resonates with me now. It was basically like he gave the story of the woman. It was either the Syrophoenician woman or I think it was. So this woman, she's not a Jew, so Jesus is technically not sent to her yet. And she asked Jesus for something, basically before the time that she's meant to, for her daughter to be, it might be delivered or healed. And Jesus is like, I didn't really come for you, so I don't know about that. And eventually, she basically pesters him into doing it. But it's her faith, basically. So she's like, he says something like, it's not good to give the children's bread to the dogs. And she's like, yeah, but even dogs can eat the crumbs off the table. And Jesus looks at her, recognizes what she said, remarks on how like amazing her faith is, and then he does what she asks for, right? So he looked at that story and was like, it was when Jesus heard that and recognized the faith in her that he was like, I see what my father's doing right now. So he went from, sorry, I'm like, this is the wrong dispensation, I'm not for here for the Gentiles. He recognized that this, because faith only comes from him, right? He recognized that the source of this faith right now is God. God is doing something in this moment. And then shifted what he was doing, got his plans, I guess, in alignment with what he perceived God was doing in that moment. So I think that's much more what I only do what I see my father doing looks like in real life. It's not some going to heaven every day, which I was hoping it would be, the glitz and the glamour. It was much more you perceive the hand of God in everything. His actions, when you see someone moved by compassion, oh, that's God at work. I think there was a lot more of that. And then reacting to that because you know God, right? So this God being this Father, what it did for Jesus, I think, it makes sense because God, clearly this Father, has a sense of security, which is why he's able to give judgment over, able to give this and that over to the Son, But I think it gave Jesus the same sense of security because he understood who he was as the Son of this Father. So, okay, let's look at. Earlier we read Jesus talk about, you don't need to even worry about what you're asking for because the Father will provide it. Jesus, his confidence wasn't in, I am a son. Me, I am the Son of God. His confidence was in, this is what my dad is like. This is what my father's like. And because he's like this, I can trust him for X, Y, Z. His sonship was rooted in understanding what his father was like, what his father's nature, what his heart was like. And because he understood that, he could then trust. If someone's sick, I know my dad well enough to know that my dad doesn't want this person sick. So I'm now going to step in and I'm going to rectify the situation. I'm going to speak, I'm going to pray, whatever you want to say. And it's going to happen because this is what my dad is like. My dad doesn't want people to suffer. That's not what my dad is like. My dad longs people to be healed, so he will do it. Right? So we see that Jesus operated the way that he did because he understood who his father was and how his father was, like his nature, his characteristics, right? And so this understanding of God and what he was like, that's what affected even how Jesus behaved, how he was. Right, so if we go to Matthew 6, we'll probably round up here. Round up here. Matthew 6, and we will read verses 1 through 8. Matthew 6, 1 to 8. Take heed that you do not do your charitable deeds before men, to be seen by them. Otherwise you have no reward from your Father in heaven. Therefore, when you do a charitable deed, do not sound a trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may have glory from men. Assuredly, I say to you, they have their reward. But when you do a charitable deed, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, that your charitable deed may be in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will himself reward you openly. And when you pray, you shall not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues, and on the corners of the streets, that they may be seen by men. Assuredly, I say to you, they have their reward. But you, when you pray, go into your room, and when you have shut your door, pray to your Father who is in secret place, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you openly. And when you pray, do not use vain repetitions as the heathen do, for they think that they will be heard for their many words. Therefore, do not be like them, for your Father knows the things you have need of before you ask him. Cool. So, we see Jesus lives this out, right? He goes away to pray. When he prays, it's not very often that we see him pray in front of people a couple of times, and it's usually for their sake. So when he's about to raise Lazarus, he's like, I do this so that they know that you're with me. That's the only reason I'm praying like this. I'm praying like this openly so that people can know who the source of what is about to happen is. So Jesus doesn't thirst for approval like these other guys do. These people, these Jews, right? These Pharisees, that they pride themselves on being children of Abraham. We see that in, I think, John 8. Oh, we're children of Abraham, I lie. Jesus, even, well, I guess them, with all that, bravado, I'm a child of Abraham, don't you know who I am? I'm a son of Abraham, cool. They thirst for approval, they need it, which is why they pray the way they do. They pray openly. Oh God, thank you that I'm not like this person. Oh God, thank you, da, da, da. And it's literally one of the prayers, like, in their liturgy at the time, they used to pray, they used to thank God. They weren't even women, for example. They used to, the men, especially in that, like the teachers of the law and stuff like that, they used to pray, thank you that I'm not poor, thank you that I'm not this, thank you that I'm not that. It was literally in part of their prayer. Jesus is like, yeah, scrap that. God doesn't care about any of that. It doesn't make you any more whatever. You have no more power with God than anybody else. And he doesn't seek the validation that comes from that, which is why they were doing what they were doing, right? He didn't need it because he understood who he was as a son, because he understood that his father loved him. When he was baptized, what happens? The heavens open and the Father says, this is my son in whom I am well pleased. And that's all that concerned Jesus. Was that my Father's pleased in me. He's pleased. He's happy with me. And again, what's great is that Jesus hadn't even started ministry when he got this seal of approval. It wasn't Jesus. God didn't wait until Jesus had healed the sick and raised the dead to then come and say, this is my son, that's my son. No. Jesus had just been a normal carpenter's son, living a normal life, no miracles, no nothing. And the Father was pleased. All right. So this then empowers Jesus to walk confidently, boldly, because he knows that his dad loves him and approves of him. And so he doesn't then have to look for approval from anybody else because he gets it from his Father. Right? He gets to live from that place of I am loved by my Father. And nothing can change that, nothing can take that away. And that is the source of how he lives as a son. And again, he emphasizes the fact that the Father knows what we need before we ask, showing again how aware God is. It's not just that God is this aloof God that doesn't care about his creation like a lot of other myths and gods were in that time. God is intricately involved with you, each and every one of us. He knows what you need before you ask it. And again, that understanding of what God was like would have given him the confidence to pray the way he did. Because he understood that my God is my Father, is so involved in my life. He's so aware of what's going on with me. I can ask him and I know that he'll do it because so much he cares. All right. We'll stop there for today. Does anybody have any questions? Anybody have any questions? Someone has a question. Let me read the scripture they brought up. All right, cool. So someone asked basically Romans 12:19. It says that Paul's talking to us about how we should live. Do not give yourselves over to wrath, for it is written, vengeance is mine, says the Lord, I will repay. Cool. So we're asked, how do we understand those kind of scriptures? Surely there's this wrath side to God. Cool. And in context here, reading before this, it's actually quite similar to Matthew 5 that we read. So you're supposed to bless those who persecute you, bless and don't curse, rejoice with those who rejoice, repay no one evil for evil. Basically, treating even your enemies nicely. We understand that that's how God is. That's what God is like. And we shouldn't live trying to be vengeful or whatever, right? We're not the ones that technically have the right to execute vengeance, I guess. But what's interesting is right after this, Paul then says, therefore, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him a drink. For in doing so, in you treating your enemy this way, you will heap coals of fire upon his head, on his head. To me, that is what the vengeance of God looks like. It's God loving his enemies and treating them exactly how they don't want to be treated, how they don't think they should be treated, how maybe they don't feel that they deserve to be treated that way. God treats them that way. And that to them is torment. It's like heaping coals of fire upon their heads. But it's not like God is actually being vengeful. It's that God is treating them the way he treats everybody else. But to them, that feels horrible because they know that what they've done, they don't deserve that. So that's how I understand it. In its context, I think that it's mirrored the way that we live, mirrors our Father. So it's not like we should live one way and then God lives the other. No way. Because then we're not being like God. We're being different to God. And maybe God needs to be like us if God is like that. So cool. Isn't the main reason we're less able to be as Tony of a cheek is because we are harmed a lot more than we imagine Jesus is. Like we don't imagine Jesus to get depressed from our actions. No, I think that people struggle with the turning the other cheek stuff because we've been conditioned to like vengeance. Like vengeance is so even for the Christian that hasn't renewed their mind in this way, vengeance is justice. Like a lot of us, yeah, that's how I should phrase it. For a lot of Christians, they understand justice to be vengeance. So if you do something to me, you need to get something done to you in return. That's just how it should work. And it's not just if you haven't gotten what's coming to you, you haven't gotten what's yours. Whereas Jesus comes along with like a whole other way, a whole other model of justice, which seems like the person doing X, Y, Z is getting away with it, and we don't like that. That's not fair. And it's the way of mercy as opposed to the way of supposed justice, which we call it, but it's more vengeance. So I think that's more why people are less able to be turn the other cheek kind of people, because they don't think that's fair. And we want what's fair until it's us that needs mercy. Everybody everybody wants justice until they're in need of mercy. When they need mercy, all of a sudden, no, beg you, allow me, man. But if it's other people in the same shoes, no, they need what's getting, like, bring it to, give it to him, give it back. It's yeah. It's interesting that we're like that. Any other questions? Any other questions? No. Cool. If not, I'm gonna wrap it up. Let me end this recording.